The council will come to order this evening. At this time, we'll be hearing a presentation on the Chelsea Harbor Downtown Norwich Mobility Study. Council of Governments has been assisting us throughout this process. We're very grateful for that. And the floor is yours, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Nystrom, Council President Pro Tem DeLucia, and members of the City Council. For the record, my name is Jim Butler. I'm affiliated with the Council of Governments, and I'm joined tonight by our consultant team from VHB. I want to thank you for allowing us the time this evening to present to you our recommendations for improving mobility and safety for all modes of travel in downtown Norwich. We began this CONDOT-funded study a little over a year ago with the hope that we might formulate a plan that, when implemented, would prove transformative for the city. I believe we've done so. Before turning the mic over to Dan Amstutz from VHB, I want to recognize the vision of retired Public Works Director Pat McLaughlin, who first asked the Council of Governments to pursue the study funding. It was a personal pleasure for me to work with Pat on this and with all the city staff who contributed their time to this effort. Thank you again.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having us here. Again, my name is Daniel Amstutz. I'm a senior transportation planner with VHB. I'm joined by my colleague Joe Balskas, who will be here to help with any questions that you may have at the end. So we are here again to present on the Chelsea Harbor Downtown Norwich Mobility Study, and we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about the recommended concept, the recommended plan itself, and also we'll talk more about the options we had when we came to you before. We had 3 different options that we were looking at for specifically the bridges on the west side of downtown, and so we're coming back with a recommendation that we'd like to share with you that we'll put into the final plan as part of the end of this project. All right. So before we get into that, I'll just spend maybe 2 minutes talking about what happened sort of between the last time we came to you in mid-March and now, with some public engagement that we did, again, to shop around the different concepts to get some public feedback on them. We also met with our Transportation Advisory Committee on June 10th, which has been helping to really get into the details of the different concepts and the different recommendations, and they provided a lot of guidance on what we're suggesting we'll be recommending in the end. And then we'll really get into the improvements, show you more about them, overview them, and what sort of changes that we have made based on the public information meeting and also the advisory committee, what their suggestions were. And so we'll detail those as we go through them, and then we'll have option for questions and discussions afterwards. We'll also talk about the final schedule for the project. So since we met, I believe it was March 18th, we have had a couple of other events that we've done to really get out more to the business community and to members of the public. We had a walk around downtown in early May where we had a little pop-up tent at Howard T. Brown Park, and then we also spoke to residents and businesses. We actually walk around and went into the businesses to talk to them about the project and to get them interested and aware of the public meeting that we had on June 5th. And at this public information meeting, we had about 30 people that attended, and really we had an overall positive response to the recommendations, to the improvements that we heard. You know, one of the sort of decision points is about these options that we have for the bridges, and the feedback we heard was kind of mixed. People liked different options for different reasons, and I'll go into that in a few minutes when I get to that point. But there were some different concerns shared that we also wanted to take into account about maintenance of the bridges, the positioning of a passenger rail station, emergency vehicle access, and other things that, again, we wanted to look at more closely. We also participated in a crosswalk painting that took place with the NCDC over on Cliff Street in front of the library as part of our project as well. At the Transportation Advisory Committee on the 10th, we talked about the June 5th public meeting and what had happened there. And again, we got really deep into those different proposed improvements and the 3 bridge options. We took a couple hours to really talk about them in detail, and we made some different revisions. We went through things step by step, And the TAC really preferred the option 3 for what would happen to the bridges. And option 3 is having both bridges two-way. And some of those reasons that I'll get into in a moment talk about maintenance, the mobility of getting people around, and also the access, especially to the transportation center and also the marina. But I do want to stress that that doesn't mean that the other two options that we've talked about before can't still be considered. We actually see this as more of a jumping off point to where the other two options could be tested or tried out later on once more of the other changes are made as well. So I'll get further into that, but getting straight into the recommended transportation improvements. So as I said, the recommendation for the bridge part of it is option 3 to convert both of the bridges to two-way. And the rest of what you see here, and we'll zoom in on each part of the map here, sort of east of the Washington Square, is more or less the same or very similar to what we presented a couple months ago and at the public information meeting. As we go over to the east side of downtown, where you can see the Franklin Square roundabout that's there on the left side, and on the east is on the right side is Main Street at Viaduct Road. We've, a lot of the same things that we had suggested still hold true that we're recommending now. The curb extensions on Main Street are important to help people cross the street. We've heard a lot of concerns about crossing at the post office, and to help shorten those crossings and also slow people down as they're going down Main Street, as they're driving down Main Street. We'll also be looking at revising the traffic signal that's at the intersection of Main Street and Viaduct Road. And up on the left side where you see it says narrow intersection of Cliff Street and Market Street or Main Street, that's where the crosswalk painting was actually done. So there is, we're trying to narrow that down by putting in a little splitter island and making that safer for people to cross, as it is a long crossing as is right now, and not a lot of friction to stop people that are coming down Cliff Street and coming down to make that right turn. So one of the things I want to point out also is that when we talked to the advisory committee, they had some concerns about having the bicycle lanes on Viaduct Road. Although Viaduct Road is wide enough, the bridge is wide enough to have bicycle lanes, they were concerned that this wouldn't be a very attractive bike route. And if somebody was in trouble, if they were in a crash with a vehicle, that they wouldn't really have anywhere to go or any way to get out of danger. So we have removed the bike lanes from Viaduct, which we had on there before, and which we had before we shared lane markings on Main Street. So that would be more of the bike route that people would take if they're biking around downtown. We did also spend a little bit of time looking at whether you would be able to put bike lanes on Main Street for bike mobility. But with the parking that's there right now on both sides of the street, it's not really wide enough. So that's something that may need to be tackled in the future if that's something that the city wanted to do. I'm going to focus more on the right side here, showing the right turn lane from Viaduct Road onto Main Street. So we'd identified this as an area of persistent congestion and would likely get worse in the future as people are coming down Viaduct and turning on to Main Street to continue east on Route 2, and also coming from the west and turning on to Viaduct as well. So what our recommendation is to incorporate a right turn lane so that people can move along and reduce some of that congestion off of Viaduct. And part of this is to include a sort of pedestrian overlook. You can see the sort of orange space that's on the right side could be an overlook of the river. It would require the widening of the bridge over the railroad, so it would be a significant project. But this was, one of the most feasible options that we could see is helping to reduce congestion at the intersection. Now, when we did talk to the Transportation Advisory Committee, they asked us, well, did you look at a roundabout here, as we've looked at roundabouts at other parts of the downtown? And we didn't initially look at it because of the impacts in order to really do this, you'd either have to impact the bridge on the lower right side or impact the building on the upper left side. So we've used a sort of standard diameter 120-foot circle to look at this at a very high level to see if a roundabout would fit, and that would be the 120-foot is a standard single lane roundabout. And as you can see here, that blue circle goes right into that building that's on the upper left, and there are 364 Main Street, I believe. So that would have a significant impact if that was done. If it was done, you would also want to include Park Street within this, so it would be more of a five-lake intersection, because you can see that Park comes in on the left side and isn't actually part of the existing signal. So trying to incorporate into all that, would be part of the design. But we did look at it a little bit, and it would improve safety certainly, and also traffic flow if you were able to put something there. So that, we would put this as more of an alternate potential suggestion for, but not currently our recommendation. So continuing on, as we move further to the west, right outside here in City Hall, we showed this to you before, showing the changes that would be to Broadway and also to Bass Street. Bass Street becoming two-way, Broadway being shrunken down to one lane and having angled parking along the roadway, along Broadway, to increase the number of parking spaces that are there. As part of this, we also included some street sections to sort of help you visualize these sort of cartoony sections, but they help to see. So Broadway, you can see where if you were looking north on Broadway, you can see the one lane on the left side and then the angled parking on the right, and then the Bass Street, changing it from one-way to two-way would be a fairly simple exercise since it's already wide enough to be a two-way street as it is. And going further to the north, we were also tasked to look at Franklin and Boswell and also Oak Street. And so this currently is a very wide open intersection that has a triangle in the middle. As we talked about at the public information meeting, we would tighten that up, really remove the signal there, it wouldn't be necessary anymore, and convert it to a four-way stop. One of the comments that we gotten at the advisory committee was about the sort of area next to the parking, to make sure that people wouldn't be sort of chomping over grass while they're going to the parking. And so we would look at, you could turn that into a sort of pedestrian plaza type area with some tree pits and trees and really beautify the area that way. So that was something that also changed between the public information meeting and today. So moving along to the west, as we talked about, this, again, wouldn't change very much from what we had discussed before, but just to go over it again, these would be very significant changes. Taking Water Street and making it two-way and converting Chelsea Harbor Drive on the bottom side to really a local street, really a one-way on one side as you come in, and then it would be two-way so that you can get to the businesses that are up on the close to Water Street and then back again, and then cutting off the connection from Chelsea Harbor Drive to Water Street, which will improve the functioning of the signal and the operations that is happening by really moving the traffic so that it doesn't have to make that right turn anymore when it's coming along Route 2, but it can continue straight along the flow. And also looking at the intersection of Talman and Water and Viaduct Road, as we mentioned before, trying to eliminate a couple of the approaches to that intersection. It currently has 6 different approaches, so it's got 6 different phases that has to, or 6 different phases it has to go through. But simplifying the operations there will really improve the operations of that intersection. And then just zooming in a little bit on the Chelsea Harbor Drive section, we also, again, to help people as they're coming out of the park and out of this area, in order for them to get back onto Water Street and back onto Route 2, we do recommend that there would be a traffic signal at Market Street and Water Street. We did talk to a few businesses. They were in support of this, as they were concerned about people speeding down Water Street and being able to actually get out onto the street was difficult from Market Street, and also really for pedestrians to be able to cross this intersection. That's a challenging intersection for them. Again, showing some of the ways that it could look, in a sort of a vision. Water Street, looks much the same if you just convert it to two-way. You have enough width in order to do that. Chelsea Harbor Drive, if you take away, there's essentially 3 lanes or almost 4 lanes of traffic if you count the parking lane that's there. If you were able to remove a couple of those, you could include a protected bike lane or a separated bike lane, also trees potentially or other vegetation to help beautify that area, make it feel like it's more part of the park as opposed to a speedway that people just run right through without seeing anything. So we thought that was helpful to visualize and to see what that will look like, and we can put that as, within the plan itself. So again, moving on to finally the west side of the downtown, which has the two bridges, which we've talked about before. Again, we do recommend option 3 for this, where in the option 3, it keeps both of the bridges open to traffic, but it makes them two-way so that it's easier for people to get around. It does also have the roundabouts not only at Washington Square and at West Main Street and North Thames Street, but also at Washington Street and West Side Boulevard. So these 3 roundabouts will improve safety. The Washington Square roundabout doesn't need to be quite as large as we had it in the other options, because when people are coming eastbound, when they're going towards downtown, if they were going to go through downtown and going toward the east towards Route 2, they could go down West Main Street. If they were going to the west and they wanted to go north towards the expressway part of Route 2, they could take West Side Boulevard. So they have more options to actually get around, and that this traffic would kind of split in these 2 different directions, and actually wouldn't need as many lanes on each road because it's taking the traffic again and it's sort of dispersing it in a different way, as opposed to forcing people to take one bridge or the other bridge to get around. So this also allows you to put in bicycle lanes for bike mobility on both West Side Boulevard and West Main Street. So this important to connect to the bike lanes that would be on West Main Street further to the west, and use a shared use path through the roundabout, and then continuing to the east or the other way around. And again, provide some looks at sort of what that could look like. You do have the space there in order to have your pedestrian facilities, your bicycle facilities, and the driving lanes as well. And as I mentioned or foreshadowed sort of earlier, option 3 we see as really a starting point for continuing to work on, potentially moving towards option 2 or option 1. It really doesn't preclude either of them. It does provide safety benefits for all users with your roundabouts, your bicycle lanes, your wider sidewalks. So it improves that bicycle and pedestrian mobility. That was one of the things that came up again when we talked to the advisory committee and through the public comments was, well, if you have option 1, then you're having everybody have a really great facility that is on West Side Boulevard for people walking and biking, but because you're pushing all the traffic onto West Main Street, you don't really have any space for bike lanes. You may have to compromise some of the pedestrian facilities to get in all the lanes that you need in order to move that traffic over there. And also for, to keep access for the marina, for the transportation center. So by splitting this traffic, you are actually able to get more pedestrian and bike facilities on both of these roadways. Access to the marina and the transportation center was also very important as part of the consideration as well. We heard a lot about concerns for the transportation center as well as for the marina, and say option 2, for example, sort of making that a kind of by sort of making an endpoint to the marina there that it might sort of cut off access that they want and they need. So that was, and it's also improved by making things two-way, so that instead of having to turn right and then going back around and coming around again to up Washington Street and down West Side Boulevard, if you were trying to go to the west, that you'd be able to turn left out of there and easily go again back down Main Street, or to the right to go towards downtown. So the last thing that I'll mention is also there was, with option 1, we heard concerns about the maintenance costs of that bridge. If Connecticut DOT was to say, well, now that it's a pedestrian bridge, it's no longer, under our maintenance program. So that was, that we understand that concern. Then we understand that maybe something to explore further on if you wanted to continue to move forward towards a more option one, the Bridge of Roses, which I'll talk about again in just a moment. And we feel that if you do option 3 as well, that you can actually test and move on to option 1 and 2 before you actually implement and make a whole Bridge of Roses immediately. You could potentially close off West Side Boulevard for a period of time for a festival, for a day. Or similarly for the sort of pedestrian plaza that we have as part of option 2, that could also be, again, closed off for a day or a few days and sort of see how that would work as opposed to simply going forward and implementing it right away. So we think those are really benefits to helping to get in that direction, but also get the benefits of having these two-way streets as well. So just the last couple of slides, just to remind you about option 2. They are in the packets as well, but option 2 has the plaza with sort of multi-use path that's near the marina that you can see on the right side of the screen. And again, this is something that, again, could be worked towards. We understand that it does have a better, you're able to sort of better connect the transportation center more directly to downtown and to Howard T. Brown Park. This is certainly another option. You could still put bicycle lanes on West Side Boulevard in this option. And then on the sort of lower right side, and again, an example of what that sort of plaza multi-use path area could look like with street vendors and benches and other things to make it more of a pedestrian-friendly area. And then to option 1 with the Bridge of Roses, again, it wouldn't preclude you necessarily from going in this direction to have option 1 to, again, have all the traffic coming on West Side Boulevard, or excuse me, West Main Street, so that you can have the Bridge of Roses that's on the West Side Boulevard Bridge. But again, just some ideas of sort of what that might look like if it was to move forward. You would still need to have the 3 traffic lanes on West Main Street in this situation, but you could have the bridge that has a bike facility that has place for people to walk, some vegetation, and also some street vendor type areas, which again we rendered in this picture as well. So I'll just mention, we do expect we'll be completing the documentation on this final recommended option, developing the final plan, and having the draft and final study report for the fall so that the city can move forward with its next steps. So thank you very much, and happy to take any questions or discussion.
Yes, thank you. Brought forth. There we go. I'm interested in option 3, personally. I always thought that was the most useful, considering the needs of business and access and stuff like that. I'm very interested in the concept over by the end of the viaduct where you're expanding that right-hand structure to allow for a right turn lane. I think that is creative use of that area. You may not know this, but if you go across the street, there used to be a large building that the rail line ran under, which now looks just like a part of the embankment and the rail disappearing under the bridge, but there previously was a structure on the other side. So use of that, I think, is very creative. We didn't talk about this, and I'm going to ask one question, turn it over to members. We have talked for a long time about redesignating Route 2, taking it out of downtown Norwich. Whether we call it scenic Route 2 or not, I don't know, but we know there are thousands of cars that travel through downtown. They have no intent on stopping here. They're not patronizing our businesses, our restaurants. They're just passing through for a different destination. I don't know if you even looked at that, and that's really the question, or if you have any information that you could help lend that discussion, because I think for this to be really successful, we need to include that discussion.
I will say that we did not specifically look at that. We did talk about that a bit with, I think when we had discussed sort of traffic going, when you make these changes and how people will change their behavior, and they may go different ways if they see, well, if you go through downtown, and you look at your Google Maps or your Waze or something, it'll take 3 more minutes to go through downtown because of the changes here, as opposed to going another way, maybe down 395 to 2A, and that'll, be 3 minutes faster than going through downtown. So people will likely change their behavior when they see that. It isn't something that was part of our scope to look at, but it is something that we'll include in the report as a possibility, as something that may, in order to shift some of that traffic maybe more directly, that would be an option to look at with the DOT.
Thank you. Members, Alderman Singh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just have a quick question. I don't know if you have answer. It's very preliminary right now, but option 2 and option 3, if we go with 2 and 3, first of all, it requires extra roundabout, and it also requires to take away some of the properties which are paying us taxes. Right? Do we know how many properties are on the stake if we go with option 2 and option 3? Also on option 1, I might have a different opinion, because while the traffic is going to casinos, we have an opportunity to make another tourism spot by creating that Bridge of Roses, so people can actually stop by, and if they stop by, they might go somewhere and eat something, you know what I mean, and support the local business. But do we know like how many properties are on the stake on option 2 and 3? Because it have one extra roundabout as well. Thank you.
Yes, so when we looked at, I will say that when we looked at Washington Square, we do see that there would be some impact to a property that I believe is vacant, or at least was vacant when we were looking at it. There's a building and then a parking lot that is around at Main Street, and I think between Main Street and Church Street. That's on the very right side of the image here. And so we do see that there could potentially be some impact to that property. We did not go and look specifically at each property to see how they would be impacted, since that would be more of a design question if you wanted to move forward and see exactly how much right-of-way may be needed or how much property, and if it would impact a property so much that it may not be viable anymore. I think there could potentially be some impact with the West Side Boulevard and Washington Street roundabout. It may get into, there's a building there, a single building that is on the, sort of at the end of the West Side Boulevard, or right across from it, that could be impacted. It is something that we can put in a report to talk about it in a little bit more detail. We do know with roundabouts that they are much larger, they take up more space within an intersection, and that does tend to be a concern when it comes to those impacts. I will say that I don't believe that, we don't believe that there would be a significant impact with the one at West Main Street and North Thames Street. So that is something that we can talk about a bit more in our report. And what was your second question? Oh, about the tourism. Yes. I mean, again, we don't think that this option 3 precludes going further towards option 1. One of the challenges that comes with the Bridge of Roses that we discussed as well with the TAC was around sort of the programming of that, the kind of maintenance that comes with that, not simply the maintenance of the bridge itself, but sort of the maintenance of that as a attraction as well. I think, you could look at it and say, well, if it's a tourism attraction, it is also bringing in people and bringing in economic development as well. But that was something that was raised as a concern, is something that may require more people or more resources in order to actually have that, again, a really nice piece of tourist attraction that you really keep up. So, but again, option 3 doesn't necessarily preclude from going in that direction in a future time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members, questions at this time?
Thank you.
Appreciate all the effort and look forward to the final report. Thank you very much. Thank you.